Here we go, the last lesson of week 2. Now that we're back into a school routine, well, sort of, we can be glad when weekends roll around. It's been good to make contact with some of you this past week. Thank you for your cheerful messages and your can-do attitudes. I'm so proud of you. Today, we're going to complete Act 2. Yes, same old, same old. Get everything you need and get settled. As with every other lesson this week, this lesson is split in 2. We'll first consolidate our knowledge of Scene 3, and then we'll do Scene 4. If you weren't able to get through everything yesterday, not to worry. You'll be able to catch up today. Your theme notes must be getting longer. Remember to keep adding to them every lesson. The Porter scene provides comic relief after the murder of Duncan. Your understanding of this scene hinges on the meaning of the word equivocator. Of course, much of the humour is bawdy, with loads of sexual innuendo. I'm sure it reminded you of the play you studied in grade 8, Romeo and Juliet, and the cringe-inducing banter between Samson and Gregory. Who could forget, I am a pretty piece of flesh? This bawdiness is typical of Shakespeare's plays. It would most certainly have entertained the crowds, while giving them a chance to breathe after the horror of the murder scene. The discovery of Duncan's murder takes quite a while. This is to build tension again after the laughter with the drunk porter. There's also an opportunity to convey information to the audience about the strange weather. It's funny how murders are never committed in broad daylight, with warm sunshine, cherry blossoms, and chirruping birds, isn't it? It's noteworthy that Macbeth will not enter Duncan's bedchamber. Is he too afraid to witness the results of his naked ambition? The news of Duncan's death spreads quickly. Did you notice how Macbeth's speech patterns changed? He starts babbling, speaking in flowery language, and possibly drawing attention to himself. It's often said that someone who speaks too much is trying to hide something and shouldn't be trusted. Note how Lady Macbeth fakes a faint to divert everyone's attention from her husband's nervous prattle. Understandably, Duncan's sons are nervous. They don't know whom they can trust and flee Scotland. This suits Macbeth, as he can use this as ammunition against the brothers. After all, only the guilty flee the scene of a crime. A tip to remember the destination of each son. Malcolm, the heir, goes to England. Donalbain, the younger brother, goes to Ireland. You spell Donalbain with an I, the first letter of the country to which he fled. Are you ready for the final scene of the act? It's a short scene, illustrating the aftermath of the murder. Once again, we are going to eavesdrop on the lesson taught by British teacher Mark Birch.
Hi, this is Mark Birch with a quick revision of Macbeth Act 2, Scene 4. This scene essentially provides an opportunity for Shakespeare to explore the universal and profound effects of committing regicide. The great chain of being has been disturbed, and in this first section, the old man's age shows that the terrible nature of this knight's unruly behaviour is profound, even given his vast experience. He's lived for 10, in other words, for 70 years, and yet he hasn't seen anything as dreadful and strange as this. Ross's response can be quite confusing, but the thing to recognise is that he's exploiting the semantic field of the theatre. Thou seest the heavens. Now, the heavens were a theatrical, technical term for the hangings that concealed the stage. We've also got references to act and stage itself here. And what I'd argue is that this conveys the idea of a stage, a small area, a representation of a greater whole, being a microcosm for the repercussions of the knight's actions on the kind of macrocosmic scale. In other words, we've had a small thing happen here, the death of a king, the murder of a king, but its effect, given that it's the murder of a king, in terms of the great chain of being undermined, is global, it's massive, it's universal. So the thing that's being acted out here has global significance. Ross goes on to ask the question about whether nights overpowered day, and if such, then we have the victory of evil over good, or whether the day is actually ashamed to expose the terrible deed that's currently hidden by the darkness, that deed, of course, being the murder of Duncan. And what he gives us is a personified earth buried by darkness, the face of earth entomb. Shakespeare's used these metaphors of life and death in an entirely appropriate way given the context of Duncan's murder. Again, the universal effect of the regicide of the king is evident in the fact that, although it should be daytime, the world is shrouded in night. The unnatural nature of this is made explicit by the old man, and he gives an example of, on Tuesday last, a falcon towering in a pride of place was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. This is a subversion of the great chain of being. The falcon should be superior to the owl. It certainly shouldn't be hunted by it. And for the audience, this inversion of the natural order will represent the inversion of the natural order in terms of Macbeth having killed Duncan, an aristocratic inferior killing his superior. And finally, Ross echoes the words of the old man by referring to an incident with Duncan's horses. So these are the royal horses, those aristocratic beasts which are the minions of their race. And as such, they could be said to symbolise what happens in terms of the Scottish crown following the murder of Duncan. They did eat each other, turned on one another, in the same way that later on in the play the Thanes turn against Macduff. And what we have here is a description that comes straight from Holinshed's Chronicles, both the description of what happened with the horses, with the falcon, and indeed the eclipse, the world going dark, are all taken as kind of historical facts by Shakespeare and then supplanted in the play. Okay, ta.
The 2 points you should get out of this scene are the reaction of the physical world, the earth and the animals, to the murder of an anointed king, and Macduff's distancing himself from his new king. It's telling that Macduff chooses to go home to Fife instead of attending Macbeth's coronation in Scone. Yes, that is right, Scone. A scone is something you eat with jam and cream. By now you should be expecting key quotes at the end of each lesson. On this slide, I am reminding you of the great chain of being. The conversation between Ross and the old man emphasizes the chaos in the natural world. Macduff tells us of the departure of Duncan's sons, but it's clear that he isn't convinced that they are guilty. The old man's blessing has within it an echo of the witch's first words, fair is foul and foul is fair. We are reminded that appearance and reality are not the same thing. I was struck by a thought this week. What would Shakespeare have done with Macbeth during a stay-at-home order in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic? Duncan would never have made that trip to Inverness, and well, then we would have had to study something else. Have a good weekend, grade 10s. See you next lesson when we start Act 3.